Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome back to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Peter Baracchini, and as always, I'm joined by my Maple Leaf colleague and writer over at the Hockey Writers, Alex Hobson. Alex, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing solid. I've had a good weekend. I had to get a bat out of my room at 3:30 in the morning last night, and 9 hours later, I'm awake and ready to talk hockey. So, yeah, it's been a solid day for me.
That is really something. I hope you didn't turn into Batman, but
nope.
that would be.
I hope I turned into Batman. I don't know about you. I think that'd be awesome.
Oh man. Well, I'm gonna keep my nerd fandom side out of this because we're here to talk Maple Leafs. And this week's episode is brought to you once again by morningskate.io, the daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday, jammed packed with the best hockey stuff on the planet. It is your daily dose of NHL news, rumors, funnies, quizzes, you name it. You'll get all of that and more information brought to you by the great writing staff over at the Hockey Writers. All you have to do is put your email in the link in the description below, and you are set to go. So the last few weeks has been pretty busy in regards to the Maple Leafs. You know, there was the Matt Murray trade. There were the signings of Ilya Samsonov, Kalle Jarnkrok recently, Victor Mete, and Jordy Ben. As a result of those names, one name is still unsigned, and that is Rasmus Sandin. Obviously, he's a restricted free agent, still looking for a new contract. Before previously, Timothy Liljegren re-signed with the Maple Leafs 2 years, $1.4 million per season. But Sandin is still remaining without a contract. Alex, what are your thoughts on this? Is this kind of like the whole negotiation tactic just playing out, or is there going to be some panic in regards to Sandin's future or just among the Maple Leaf fan base, given how much they like him?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that there's going to be a trade to happen, whether it's creating space to sign Sandin or in the event that things really go south, a trade to move him out of Toronto in the end. So I think that, you know, with the amount of players the Leafs have signed right now, we talked last week about how now they've got 9 NHL defensemen on their roster, and that's obviously not sustainable. So I think that we are going to see something happen before the end of the summer. I know that seems like a Captain Obvious statement, but what I will say is I think that the fear of him getting offer sheeted and, you know, supposedly not making progress with their contract talks, I think a lot of that is media driven, because if you look at the amount of times that a player has been offer sheeted in the past, it was Jesperi Kotkaniemi last summer. And then before that, it was someone like Steve Bernier in 2007. So offer sheets I think everyone's a little on high alert over offer sheets now because of the whole thing that happened with Montreal and Carolina last year. I don't think that Sandin getting offer sheeted really is a threat or a worry. At the same time, I'm not really sure if there are, like, the reports have been saying that, you know, contract talks with him haven't gone as smoothly. And if that is true, I don't really understand why, because, you know, obviously the left side of the defensive core is pretty stacked right now with Riley Muzzin and Giordano, but, you know, Giordano's only signed on for 2 years. Jake Muzzin, who knows how much he's got left in the tank. Like, I still think there's a very clear path for Sandin to get onto that left side at some point. So I don't think it's a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when. I think they're going to get him signed eventually. You know, he's been Dubas and Keefe's boy ever since the 2018 draft. And, you know, I think a lot of people forget that he developed really, really quickly for a defenseman. You know, drafted in the first round in 2018. Obviously, I think with his play style, especially, he's typically the type of player that you want to develop and, you know, really hone his skills. But his hockey IQ is already up there. His defensive awareness is already up there. His offense still has to come along a little bit. But I think that the Leafs really like Sandin, and I'm not really worried about an offer sheet. I think that, you know, maybe they're just waiting for the dust to settle a little bit and maybe waiting for some more clarity around the roster before they move forward with the signing. But seeing what Liljegren signed for, I can't see Sandin really commanding too much more than him.
Yeah, and you mentioned the offer sheet too. I think a lot of the media outlets just want to push the offer sheet because it hasn't happened as often. And there was also that big Shea Weber thing years back that led to his current contract. But yeah, I mean, it's not ideal that Sandin remains unsigned considering how much he's developed, especially coming out of junior, making the AHL. He steadily, progressively got better as time went on. And, this is a former, top defenseman at the World Juniors, and he's displayed that for all the right reasons: his offense, his defense. You just mentioned his IQ. So to see him still unsigned is a little bit worrisome in my view. But then again, you're really, really stacked on the left side. And if not a move to sign him, then what do you do with him to try and bring him in and get help on the right side and try and address the positional need? And not something that you want to do, but I know we already mentioned that, you would like to still see him signed, but how likely is a trade to happen with Sandin if talks still go nowhere and it's, creeping up to September and, he needs to play. He wants to play and he's going to get an opportunity somewhere else. How likely do you think that's going to happen?
I only see a trade happening if talks sour between them to the point where, Sandin wants the ice time right now and Dubas can't promise it. The Leafs can't promise it like consistently for the next couple of years, at least until Giordano and Muzzin are both gone. And at that point, I think that there would probably be a trade that happens. But like I said, I don't really think that things are going to sour that much. I think that Sandin knows how much the Leafs value him. I think maybe he probably just has some extra concerns, like I said, over, re-signing Giordano to 2 years and, still having Muzzin on the back end. Obviously, Riley was just re-signed last year to a 7-year contract. So I think that there's definitely some concern from Sandin's side, but I can't see a trade happening unless, one person says the wrong thing, the relationship sours, and all of a sudden, they're kind of nearing the point of no return. I think, like I said, that, Sandin's still only 21 years old right now. Yeah. And that's pretty young for a defenseman in the NHL, and let alone a defenseman, who's in his 3rd year of getting playing time, 1st year of regular playing time. But anyways, so I think that there's still a lot of potential with him. I think he easily could be a top 4 defenseman in the future. And I don't think he's too far away from that. I think he just needs to get the minutes to prove that he can play. And those minutes might not be readily available over the next couple of years, but there is a path for him to be in that position eventually. So I think, like I said, unless one person says the wrong thing and those two just, something happens to deter the relationship, I don't think we're going to see a trade. And I think if we do see a trade, I think that, Leafs are going to have some leverage there. And I think they're going to do everything they can to get a proper return for him.
Yeah, and our colleague over at the Hockey Writers, Andrew Forbes, wrote a great piece that the Maple Leafs still our strong left side remains without Sandin, given the depth that they have right now. And as we mentioned, Ben and Mete fill out that depth, and the signing of Sandin is still possible. And I agree with that and with you as well. And just seeing this right now on Cap Friendly, both Mete and Ben are listed as both left and right defense. So there is that possibility that one of them can play on the right-hand side. And if you do sign Sandin to, let's say, a reasonable contract, I know that they're over the cap right now. They're going to have to create some space. But if you still sign to roughly around what Timothy Liljegren makes, you could still insert Mete or Ben on that right side and still play Sandin regular minutes in and out of the lineup if you need him to. But then again, that left side, you can only play 6 defense and you need 3 on the left-hand side. So still crowded no matter what, even if you do put those 2 on the right side. But then again, this is probably a good problem to have for the Maple Leafs, not so much if you're Rasmus Sandin, because you want those minutes and you're developing really well with this system and with the coaching GM that you know very well. You want to keep showing them that you deserve those minutes. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens come training camp. To recap the show, this week's episode is once again brought to you by morningskate.io. Again, It is your daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday, jam-packed with the best hockey stuff on the planet. It's your dose of NHL news, rumors, histories, quizzes, you name it. You'll get that and more. All you got to do is put your link in the description below and you are ready to go. Speaking of, camps and everything like that for the Maple Leafs, they held their annual development camp. And as always, a lot of the spotlight are going to be on some of the top names, and more so this time around. Fraser Minten was drafted in the second round this past draft by the Maple Leafs, 38th overall when they traded their first and Peter Mrazek to the Chicago Blackhawks. He looked really great for this camp. Alex, what was your take on Minten, and how do you see this as a step in the right direction for his development?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good thing when, you can show up to camp and give your team a good first impression. I know that Minton's obviously at least 3 or 4 years away from being in a Leafs jersey full time, but I think that it's a good starting point for him to show up and, impress brass. And they did say when they drafted him that one of the main reasons they took him was because of his hockey IQ and his smarts on the ice. And, they like having their players who have high IQ, and they know, they're strong positionally. So I think that it was encouraging to see Minten have a strong training camp. And like we said, when the Leafs drafted him, just looking over, like watching him play and looking over his track record throughout his junior career so far, I've seen a lot of people say that he's got the ceiling of a third line player. I disagree with that. I think that I think he's got second line potential as a center. I think he brings a lot in different areas. He's got good size, 6'1". He's strong physically. He can throw the body. Good defensively, like we said, his hockey IQ is up there, and he's a relentless player as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he plays next year in the WHL, because I know that he was sort of buried behind some bigger names on that Kamloops Blazers team. So he might have a bigger role at the team this year, and it would be interesting to see how he does in that bigger role. And if he impresses and, he keeps coming back to development camp year after year and, impressing brass and eventually working his way to the Marlies, I think there's definitely a clear path for him to get to the NHL by 2025, 2026, something like that.
Yeah, and the one thing that, again, you mentioned the IQ, and obviously it was known that the Maple Leafs were showing prospects videos and clips and everything like that to get their smarts of what they would do in a certain situation. And fantastic season with the Kamloops Blazers, 55 points in 67 games, and all of that was on display and more. There was an article by David Alter that basically described or went through Minten and his play during camp, and Haley, assistant general manager, I should say right now, new title for Dr. Haley Wickenheiser, said that he's a very cerebral guy who asks a lot of questions. For me, what stood out is how smooth he is. He looks lean off the ice, but on the ice, he uses his body well to get to the inside of the ice and seem not afraid to go to the tougher areas. Obviously, she alludes to his hockey IQ, but she also alludes to the fact that he has the skills and a way that he could become a very established NHL player. And like you said before, I don't think the third line center role is more of a floor for him. The ceiling is very, very high, given his compete, his energy, his two-way play, and the smarts. Combine all that with his offensive game that's still, developing at this point. And during one of the scrimmages, David in his post posted a tweet from the Maple Leafs Twitter account where Bo Jelsma made a nice feed to Fraser Minten, and he sniped it right off the bat. So if you're looking at his, dynamicism, his two-way game, defensive play, and all that, his offensive game is very underrated. So do not count that out as well. And, I'm very excited to see what he can do going forward, because he's got a lot of talent, a lot of potential, and this sky's the limit for him. I think that considering, he was overshadowed by some of those players on the Kamloops Blazers, this time around, he's going to take another step forward, and it's going to bode well for his development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential there. And I know you could say that about just about any prospect, but hearing the way people were talking about Minten when the Leafs drafted him, some people made it sound like a safe pick, but he was a guy that the Leafs had ranked in the top 15. And you look at what they did with Matthew Nyes last year. They took him in the second round, late in the second round. And, midway through last season, there were people saying that Nyes easily could have been a top 20 pick in the draft. So I'm definitely interested to see how he makes of his post-draft season this year.
Definitely. It's going to be a fun one. And you talk about like how this is going to go well for prospects and how they're going to continue to develop. Speaking of development, there's always going to be that one player that stood out the most. Who did you like at that development camp?
I really liked, and this is obviously the easiest answer I could take. I'm swinging at the lowest of the hanging fruit. Matthew Nyes. I think that, you're talking about this guy, or you look at this guy play, and he is just about everything the Leafs could use right now in their top six. He's 6'3". He throws the body. He's got a hell of a shot. Kind of reminds me of Austin Matthews' shot. He's got the hustle of a guy like Zach Hyman or Michael Bunting, and he's electric. He's a good skater for his size, and you could see his maturity in development camp these past couple of days. He looked like a man amongst boys. And the fact that they were asking him in training or in development camp, the reporters, and talking about him as if, there's a pretty good chance he's going to sign with the Leafs after his college season is done. And he was even saying, it'd be great to, there's still some stuff in my game that I want to work on, but I would love to help them out towards the end of the year. And I think the fact that they're already talking about potentially signing him, and hell, they even talked about potentially signing him last season when they brought in Abruzzese. So it's definitely going to be interesting. And, Matthew Nyes is a guy who obviously I hope that the Leafs do make some actual acquisitions at the deadline, but if you can sign Nyes from university, bring him into the lineup, and if he can fit into that top six role, that would be a really, really cheap and effective acquisition for them down the line. One more player I was interested in was Payno Fimis. He's a center for the Niagara Ice Dogs, and I think a lot of people were expecting him to go in the mid rounds this year, but he went undrafted. He looked impressive at training camp. He's a pretty slick player. And I like the fact that the Leafs invited him out this year, because who knows, it could set up the framework for them to draft him next year. And he's a guy that, flew under the radar, and obviously teams didn't take him this year for whatever reason. We've seen good undrafted players go in the past. So I'd like to see how he does this year, and maybe the Leafs consider taking a flyer on him next year.
Yeah, I totally agree with Nyes. And I think the fact that if he signs with the Maple Leafs, there's going to be a spot in that second or even third line role, given his potential and his upside. I think he's going to thrive in that role no matter what. For me, I am going to go with the player that was drafted after Matthew Nyes in 2021, and I'm going to say Ty Voigt. I was really impressed. Obviously, we know his playmaking abilities, his puck handling, his creativity, his skating is just off the charts. I saw another gear of that in camp. Like, he was flying out there and he was dancing with the puck really, really well. He's very confident when he has control, and he spots his teammates extremely well. Great vision, great awareness. I thought that he made a great step and took another step forward in his development after the season. And considering that he missed a full season, 80 points in 67 games, 54 assists total, and, had another strong playoffs with being a point per game, 6 points in 6 games with the Sting. So, obviously a little bit more room for him to develop. Obviously he needs to grow and get a little bit stronger, but that skill set that he's already displayed this past season and in camp right now, the Maple Leafs really do have something special on their hands in Ty Voigt, and getting him in the 5th round in 2021 was a really great selection. And I'm also going to say Bo Jelsma, another undrafted player. I was kind of surprised because I had him as sort of a third round selection, maybe at worst a 4th, but I thought that he should have gone. He has great upside. He has great shots. His skating isn't the best. He's got a good stride, but the mechanics and balance really isn't quite there. So he needs to work on that. But he does have explosive speed cutting to the outside, and he always drives hard to the net. And I think that's something that maybe that attitude, that mentality, that drive caught the Maple Leafs attention and invited him to this camp. And kind of like Fimis, I think that this puts Jelsma on the map for the Maple Leafs next season, although I think he should have been drafted. Again, some uncertainty and, inconsistency in his play. But I really thought that he came away as one of the underrated names in this prospect camp, and I'm really happy for him as well. Mm-hmm. And that is it for this week's episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. Once again, this episode is brought to you by morningskate.io, the daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday with the best hockey stuff on the planet of NHL news, rumors, histories, funnies, quizzes, you name it, you will get it all. All you got to do is put your link in the description below and you will get the newsletter from the great staff over at the Hockey Writers. Once again, that is it for this episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. For Alex Hobson, I'm Peter Baracchini, and we'll see you next time on the Maple Leafs Lounge.